I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, Health and Money, a Powerful Link. This is presented by Fidelity Investments and sponsored by your employer. My name is Alexandra Taussig. I'm a Senior Vice President at Fidelity, and I'll be moderating today's program. So today we're going to focus on health and money. It turns out there's a very powerful link between the two. And our financial situation really impacts our physical, emotional, and mental health. Throughout this discussion, we'll give you practical and easy ways to gauge your own financial and physical wellness and provide checkup tools you can use. All of the materials we'll be discussing are available on the screen for download. With that, we have an exciting agenda plan. We're going to walk you through three key areas. First of all, the link between health and money. We're going to give you some tests to gauge both your physical and your financial wellness. And then we're really going to put this into action and give you tips that you can use starting today to make a difference. So I'm joined today by Jean Chatzky, who's an award-winning personal finance journalist and financial editor of NBC's Today. Hello, Jean.
Hi, Alexandra.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And then Dr. Michael Roizen. He's Chief Wellness Officer and Chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic, who is a client of ours, a great client. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Cleveland Clinic is great. Can I call you AT?
You certainly may. Can I call you Mike?
Certainly.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Perfect. All right, so let's jump in. So Jean and Mike are writing a book together, which I've had the opportunity to read, which was a real treasure. And
thank you.
So anyway, we'll be referring to that. And so they talk about this connection between health and money. So we actually have our first question, which is from Lillian at Direct Energy. Lillian asks, what's the correlation between mental and financial health? Can you talk a little bit about that, Jean?
Absolutely. And it's very much the same correlation between physical and financial health. And that is, if one is not working in your favor, the other one's not going to work for you either. So if you are not healthy, it is really difficult to remain financially secure because healthcare expenditures will eat up so much of your money.
Yeah.
And if you are not financially secure, it's more and more difficult to stay healthy. And you have to be both in order to be age-proof, which is what we're calling our book. And as you can see, there are a lot of points that indicate that when it comes to finances, and I'll let Mike talk about the health, but when it comes to finances, we're not feeling especially secure. We know 50% of people are telling us they are not confident that they have even $1,000 set aside for emergencies. That's not a huge sum of money. When we look at people who are earning more than $100,000 a year, a third of them are carrying credit card debt and a quarter of them are having trouble making the payments. And then there's student loan debt. 1/3 of Fidelity's participants tell us that they're carrying student loan debt.
And it's not just the young kids who are carrying, or the millennials.
No, it's not. It's their parents who are sometimes still paying off their own loans, but in other cases paying off the Parent Plus loans that they took for their kids. And even if you just look at the people who are 50 and over, almost a quarter of them are still dealing with student loan debt. So it's really, really substantial. And what the research shows is that there are big health implications as well.
Right. So that much finance debt causes stress.
Okay, yeah.
And stress is the greatest ager. Mm-hmm. We know, in fact, that more than half of all stress is caused by financial problems, and that stress causes these huge medical problems. So 7 times more anxiety, 5 times more depression, 3 times more headaches and migraines, and the big one, heart attacks, twice as likely to have that if you're feeling stressed. If you look at it, marriage, a happy event can cause it.
Right.
Divorce, moving to a new city, taking a new job, all of these have huge financial implications, and those cause stress, and stress is the greatest ager.
Right.
Stress causes arterial aging, so more likely to have heart attacks, strokes, memory loss. Those are all arterial problems. Immune aging, it impedes your immune function, so more likely to get infections. And the big C, you're more likely to get that. And then, if you will, it causes memory dysfunction. there's only one organ in the body where size matters, and that's your hippocampal area, because it is the memory relay center in the brain.
Yep.
And what stress does is it knocks out the connections. It knocks out what we call the pathways for memory. So it's a big problem. You shrink your hippocampal neurons when you're stressed.
So one question, and I know you talk about it, is this particularly bad for women, Jean?
Well, women tend to be under an inordinate amount of stress, particularly these days. Women are the caregivers for aging parents. Women are still the ones who often take breaks from work to deal with crises at home. So yes, it impacts us, and it impacts us a lot. But what we're trying to do with this webcast is to put people back in the driver's seat. Mike mentioned happiness, and we know money doesn't buy more happiness once you get to a point where you're able to live comfortably. But having...
And that's a pretty low level.
It is.
It's 75,000 across the country?
Yeah, on a national average, 75,000. It's more in places that are more expensive to live and
like
less...
San Francisco.
Yeah, and less in other places. But once you get beyond that 75,000 or whatever the cost of living happens to be where you live, more money doesn't make you happier and less stressed. What does make you happier and less stressed is more control over both your finances and your health. And so this book and this webcast were designed to give you ways that you could take back control.
So tell me, I love the subhead of the book. So tell me the subhead of the book and tell
So the subhead is living longer without breaking a hip or running out of money or forgetting where you put it. So it is, if you will, those things are major stresses. You, in fact, said your mom broke a bone, right?
So my mom this summer, so when I heard this subhead, it really kind of rang true to me, because my mom fell this summer. I won't tell you her age, because she'd have my head, but she's in her mid-80s, and she...
Oh, that's pretty close.
Okay, sorry. I was going to say she's in her 80s. Okay, she's going to have my head. All right. So anyway, she fell.
We won't let her watch this.
Yeah, we won't let her watch this. So anyway, so she fell and she broke her arm. And so she couldn't get dressed. She couldn't drive for weeks and weeks. You know, really stressful for her, really stressful for us, you know, trying to take care of her and make sure, you know, we were there to get her dressed and get meals and the driving.
So you just said it was really stressful for her. We've always associated, you know, breaking a hip in a woman is a 25% lethal disease. It's even higher in a guy, 40%. Less guys break their hips, but it is lethal for both. But we've always associated it with clots in the leg or problems in the leg. But you've actually brought up an interesting point that I hadn't thought of before. It's very stressful. Stress causes, if you will, the plaques to break loose, which can cause heart attacks and strokes, even kidney disease. So it's another reason that, in fact, a bone break. Now, she couldn't do her normal things, but she also might have been worried about her finances because you've got copays and expenses.
Right, exactly. And so, which actually brings up another question about kind of healthcare expenses. So Mary at Comcast actually wrote in to say, how much do we need to prepare for future health expenses? How much do we need to save, Jean?
So Fidelity does the big study on this every year, and the most recent figure is that a 65-year-old couple needs to put away $260,000 for medical expenses, non-reimbursed medical expenses. And if you want to break that down so it sounds less panicky, it's roughly $600 to $800 a month, but it is still substantial, and it's something that you need to absolutely be planning for.
Right. So it's, you know, that's a lot of money, and you know that I think could make our viewers anxious. So Mike, can you talk a little bit about this anxiety and stress, and what does that do to our health?
Well, we were evolved, if you will, to have a stress response. When the woolly mammoth came to our cave mouth, we'd either punch him in the nose, or you'd run away, or you'd freeze and pretend to be dead. Those responses are evolved over many years. And obviously, if your boss is the one giving you a new deadline, I needed that. Yeah, I said on Friday, it's Wednesday. Now I really need it 5 p.m. today. You know, it doesn't do you much good to punch the person in the nose. It is not a real good response, and doesn't help you if you run away.
Right.
And playing dead doesn't work either. So we've evolved something that is dysfunctional. So you have to overcome your normal responses. In the book we say, in fact, that humans are programmed to do the wrong thing. We're not programmed to get to the higher level of thought and to do the right thing.
And when it comes to our health and our money, I mean, when we look at the three responses, it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? The only one that works when you're facing a health or a financial challenge is to fight. You have to fight back. So it's not a punch in the nose necessarily.
But it is dealing with the problem.
Exactly.
So, and the way you deal with it, what Jean has taught me is the way you deal with this is to get above that reptilian brain by doing things that are automatic, that are habits, if you will. So, one of the ways I deal with it from a finance standpoint is I pay myself first, right? You put in the first part of your paycheck goes into your retirement, and it's an automatic checkoff, and I don't think about it anymore.
Right. So I was very glad to hear that. Yeah. And so that's what I think of fight. When you say fight, what that means to me is you're going to stand up to kind of the health and financial and get good habits in place so that you're not an ostrich sticking your head in the sand, because that's when you start to feel stressed, like I'm not doing anything. You got to kind of meet it head on, if you will.
Right. And that means knowing what you're meeting, right? When it comes to things like your retirement plan options and your health insurance options, it means doing enough legwork and research to know what you're talking about. Right.
And by the way, just to be complete, even if the stress response doesn't cause you to break off a plaque and have a heart attack or stroke, or doesn't cause you to have the big cancer, it does things that impede our health. So it causes us to eat more. Obesity and overweight are caused. It does cause high blood pressure. It does cause us to be anxious and depressed and have fatigue. So, if you will, it does all these things that are bad, including that memory center, making it smaller.
And I do, especially to Jean's point about women, so I have a pretty demanding job, which I love, but 3 kids, a husband, a dog. I talked about my mom who broke her arm recently. So lots of things going on. And I know we've got a lot of questions from viewers. So Millie asked, how do I manage the stress? What does she do with this stress? How does she successfully manage it?
So there's several ways you can manage the stress. My favorite is, in fact, and I'm going to have you demonstrate it, is in fact, 1, put your hand on your belly button, okay? And as you take a deep breath in, your hand should move away. But I don't want you thinking about whatever else you're thinking about. I want you focusing on that finger that's on your belly button and its movement.
Can I breathe out?
No, yeah, you breathe. So, and the point is, when you take a deep breath in, don't take it in through your mouth. You're doing it perfectly. Take it in through your nose. When we're newborns, we breathe perfectly. But as we get older, we tend to breathe with our chest and do the reverse thing. So, practice breathing. So it becomes automatic that you put your finger on your belly button when you're stressed and you blow it out. Now, the reason I do that versus just meditating, meditating is another way of doing it. But the reason I do this is if a guy cuts me off while driving, I don't have to close my eyes. I close my eyes when I'm meditating, but when I'm taking a deep breath, I can keep my eyes open, and so I don't get in an accident, even though I'm annoyed at him, and I focus on my belly button.
And I'm definitely, so my husband's a yoga teacher, so this is what I call the yogic breath, in through your nose, out through your mouth, and I'm just started meditating, and it's the same. But so what I need to remember to do is when you get, if someone ticks you off when you're driving, or whatever it is, to kind of build that into your day, which it sounds like you have done, which I need to do.
Now, the other way to deal with stress is the way you two started talking about it, is being strong in your finances.
Well, research helps, right? I mean, I think knowing that you actually have information behind whatever it is that you're trying to conquer is really helpful and really powerful. And so, when we're talking about things like health insurance and picking the right plan. I mean, we're all heading into the time of year where we do that open enrollment period. we got to take a little bit of time to do our homework, and otherwise we're going to make very expensive, costly mistakes.
And I almost made a mistake recently, which thank goodness we caught. So my oldest son, Ben, just started college. And so when they sent all the paperwork this summer, they kind of sign you up for health insurance. And I said, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure he's still covered under our plan. So I looked into it, and sure enough, he was. And it was thousands of dollars. And I think they're trying to do the right thing to make sure everyone's covered.
Sure.
But that would have been thousands of dollars we didn't need to pay. So to your point.
Would have been double coverage.
Right,
you didn't
exactly,
need it.
Exactly. So, there are as many things as you can automate, but to your point, you got to kind of do your homework and pay attention
and that's
as well.
really important at this time of year because of they change plans.
Right.
You want to make sure your physician is in the plan you choose, so you can keep that physician. Now, you taught me something about HSAs.
Well, an HSA is a health savings account, and more employers are adding this option to their menus. And essentially, anytime you buy a high deductible health insurance plan, you have the option to open a health savings account. And health savings accounts are wonderful because they're what's called triple tax-free, which means you get a tax deduction for the money that you put in. The money grows tax-free. And when you pull it out, if you use it for health expenses, you don't pay any taxes on it. Right. So it can be used to stockpile a lot of money.
Okay, got it. So I opened one about 3 years ago, and we keep talking about automation and how great that is. The money automatically comes out of my paycheck, and then it goes into my HSA, and the strategy I'm using is to set that aside, keep it invested until my retirement, and then we use it for the health expenses.
Well, and you said something really important, which is that you're keeping it invested. So what we know about the way people are using health savings accounts is that many people are not even turning on their ability to invest the money. And so if you want to use it like a supplemental retirement account, which is great, then you just pay for your health care out of cash flow, you have to turn on the investment component, and you should look at investing it in a similar way to your other long-term funds, or depending on when you're actually going to use the money. But as long as you use it for healthcare, no taxes. If in retirement you use it for things other than healthcare, the money is treated as if it comes out of a 401k. So it's a really nice account.
It's a nice thing, and I don't, people are really kind of catching on to them, which is fantastic.
Now, another thing you can do is you can negotiate with your physician or your healthcare team, if you will. Most physicians don't know how to do this, but they have administrative people who do that.
Yeah, this was interesting when I learned this from you, because I never really thought about, a lot of people look at their doctors and think, they don't want to negotiate with me. They don't want to talk price with me. But sometimes it's possible with doctors, with hospitals. And there's some good resources out there for this. There's a healthcare blue book that's kind of like...
So it's a blue book like you have with cars?
Yeah, like the Kelly Blue Book, but it's for medical procedures. And there are websites like GoodRx, which tell you what are fair prices for prescription drugs. So, just under the heading of being a good consumer, doing your homework, these are all just things to put on your list.
Exactly. And so I'm learning a lot. I hope you're learning a lot as well. And I know it's so interesting to hear what the two of you have learned from each other as you wrote this book. So a tip in terms of kind of optimizing your financial health. We have something that's called My Money Checkup. It's really great, and it's these quick questions that just give you a sense of where you are financially. We also have representatives who you can talk to, and we'll give you the phone number at the end. This is part of your retirement plan. It's completely free. They can help you budget. They can help you, how do I invest for growth? They can help you plan your retirement and your Social Security claiming strategies. So those resources are available to you. Please use them. And
they're actually free, as far as I know. I've used the one at the Cleveland Clinic, and I didn't get a charge at all for it.
Completely free, which a lot of people don't realize, but they are, and they're really great. And just good to sometimes talk with other people about these topics and get a different perspective. All right, so we're going to move into our second topic now, which is how do we really gauge where we are financially and health-wise. So I want to talk to you, Mike, because I know you have kind of some different tests on how do you gauge your physical wellness.
Right. So I'm going to talk about 7 normals and 3 fitness tests.
Okay.
Now, the 7 normals, we're only going to go through a few of them today. The first, and it's the most important, you really should know your blood pressure. So I brought a very inexpensive but accurate blood pressure device. It's under $40 at all of the stores. Many, by the way, drugstores have these for free, meaning you can get your blood pressure checked for free. Remember, if you're going there, sit quietly for a few minutes.
Right.
It's likely that my blood pressure is much higher now during the Fidelity webcast since I'm under some stress now. But if you will, all you do is you turn it on. I put it at, if you will, heart level.
Yep.
You can probably hear the beep, beep, beep. So
we're supposed to do this every month, right?
Well,
how
under
often?
the age of 40, once every 6 months,
Okay,
as
well, I'm
long
not
as
that.
it's normal. And you want your blood pressure, what we call normal, is under 125
Okay.
for the upper number. That's the systolic, when your heart is actually wringing out blood. And under 85 when the heart is resting, which is
Okay.
called diastole. So the top number, less than 125. The bottom number, less than 85.
Okay.
And you do it when you're resting, not talking in front of a
Right,
TV.
right, okay.
And then what happens is you do it once every 6 months, as long as it's normal, under the age of 40, once a month. If you're over the age, I shouldn't look at that.
Don't look at that.
Okay.
It's higher than I've ever had it.
Okay.
Because he's having so much fun.
Right.
You can see, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's 165 over 94. We tend to get our blood pressure fluctuates, but that's why you do it when you're sitting quietly breathing and not under a fair bit of time pressure and other
But I
stress.
think it's nice, though, just to start to know where you are in your range. Because, before I read this book, I've always been told mine was fine, but I don't know where it is or how to monitor it. So I think that's a great tip.
The second one is your waist to height ratio. So you measure your waist, and Jean, grab that.
So notice how I did not volunteer for this one.
So you put it at the finger on the belly button, and then around yourself, parallel to the floor, suck in, because you're going to anyway.
You're allowed to suck in as much as you possibly can.
Right. And you want it to be less than half your height. So...
Okay.
Okay, are you going to share, Jean, or no?
25, but I was sucking in.
Which is amazing. I shouldn't have made you share.
And well, the one I don't want to share is my height. I am 5'2", so 62 inches tall.
So you're
62,
you're
if
awesome.
you divide it, it would be 31.
Right.
She's at 25, which puts her in the lowest risk group from that status. And your waist is really important. You notice we didn't talk about weight.
Right.
And the reason waist is important is because that's where belly fat is. And your belly fat, as opposed to hip fat, your belly fat is what we call metabolically active. It creates inflammatory things which cause you to have heart attacks, which cause you to break off plaque in your arteries to your brain, which cause you to impede your immune system, and also do that other thing we talked about is shrink your brain, memory center, your hippocampus. So belly fat is really important.
And so we were talking earlier about the apple and the pear, the different types of bodies.
Right.
So it's the apple that's, when you have the belly fat, that's more risky than the pear if you kind of carry it lower.
So this is something that almost every guy has in his tool shop because he tried to fix something once in his day, and maybe it's a mechanical one. But he should put it at his belly button and suck in, because in men, the apple shape is much more common than the pear shape.
Right.
And it's really dangerous. Most guys, when you ask them what their waist is, they'll tell you their belt size, right? The last time they got a new belt was when they graduated from high school, usually. And all they do is they let everything else flop over it, right? In fact, we actually have a disease that's associated with it. It's called tight pants syndrome. But it is, they've put on this and they sucked in to get the belt tight, and they impede blood flow and they push on their nerves.
My word.
So they end up with pain in their legs. And it's one of the great things in the emergency room you can cure with just undoing the guy's pants, right?
Say, go
shopping.
Pants
and you're a genius.
Yes,
exactly.
So now I know you have a test about stress. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The third of those 7 normals is you want to have a normal stress level. So the perceived stress scale was developed at Carnegie Mellon in 79 to 83. And it is, a guy named Sheldon Cohn did it, if you will. And it is 10 questions. We have 3 here today, but they give you an indication. So the first is, how often in the past month have you felt nervous or stressed? And the scale is from 0 to never to 4 almost always.
Okay.
So you grade yourself on that scale. If you had, if you felt nervous or stressed almost all the time, that's a 4.
Yep.
If you never felt it, it's a 0. So we're going to write those 3 numbers down and you're adding them up. The second question is, how often in the past month have you not felt on top of a lot of things? If you've always been on top of things, that's a 0.
Yep.
If you felt like things were getting out of control, that's a 4.
Yep.
And the third question is, how often in the past month have you felt unable to control the important things in your life? If you felt unable to control them all the time, that's a 4.
Yep.
If you felt like you could control them all the time, that's a 0.
Okay.
And then you use the 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
Now, if you got an 8 or above, that's a fairly high level of stress on these 3 questions, and you should take the full 10-question test. I think you should take the full 10-question test all the time. Everyone should take the full 10-question test at the end of this and see where you are. If you're above a 19 on that full 10-question test, then you really need to learn how to manage stress, that deep breathing or meditation. We'll go over some others in the materials.
And I wonder if it's like your blood pressure that, to me at least, it fluctuates a lot depending on what's going on at that point in your life.
Well, I think that's why it's the month-long measurement, right?
Correct.
So
that's why we do it for over a month.
Got it.
But it still does depend on, if you're getting married next month, that's going to be a lot different than if you're getting divorced or if you're
going
moving
on vacation.
Exactly.
Or planning a vacation.
Yes.
Actually, people say the least stress there is when they're planning a vacation.
Right.
So, now,
okay, so now those were the 7 or 3 of the 7 normals. And I know you said there were some fit tests. So talk to us a little bit about those.
By the way, your real age, that is, we look at aging based on what your body's age is, not what your calendar age is.
Okay, so I love this strategy or this concept because I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do the whole thing, and I'm hoping that I'll be 29.
It's a free test at realage.com, but let me go and say for women, so Jean isn't any place close to 75, but were she 75, she could have a real age of 46. So you can be 29 years younger.
Yep.
You can actually be about 40 years older, too. So at age 40, you could be 80 equivalent.
Right.
So,
and what's interesting to me, I was talking about my mom, like we do, especially older people, you kind of say, oh, they're young.
Yeah.
And it's really like as people get older, people really seem much younger or kind of their age or older, and you can't imagine that some people are the same age. And you really start to see that.
There are 3 easy physical tests you can do to gauge where you are just from a physical standpoint, musculoskeletal standpoint.
Okay.
The first is the push-up test. So you go and do push-ups, and you can do them like this, or you can do them with your knees, and in your 40s, you should be able to do 11 to 15 of them.
Okay.
As you get older, you do fewer. But if you can still do 15 at age 60, you're the equivalent of in your 40s from that point of view. The second test, now, can you guess what the second one is? If I did push-ups for the first one, that's right, sit-ups.
Yes.
So 11 to 14 is common for people in their 50s and early 60s.
And really, are you supposed to count as many, do as many as you can
in 1 minute.
Okay, got it.
And then the third is, can you get out of a chair without using your hands? No, you used your hands.
Whoa.
That's illegal.
Okay, hang on.
So you got to get out of the chair.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, good.
So that says you're younger than your calendar age.
Okay, good.
How much younger? We got to use the other test.
I got to use the full battery.
I like that you did all the push-ups and everything without even taking a breath.
Yeah, well, it's
you
not
didn't
that,
stop talking.
It's not that hard,
No. So those are fantastic tips. So, Jean, talk a little bit about kind of on the financial side. How do we gauge where we are financially?
Okay, so we've got 4 measurements that you can look at. The first one is taking a measurement of what you earn, what you own, and what you owe. And you essentially own and owe. So you want your earnings, at least if you're still in your working years, to be heading up. You want what you own, your assets, also to be heading up. The trajectory is up. And you want what you owe, although it climbs in your early working years, to start to tail down as you close in on retirement. And it's best if you can get to retirement without a mortgage.
Got it.
Because that just gives you some wiggle room to breathe as you adjust your budget. The second thing is to take a look at your debt to income ratio. And if you've gotten a mortgage, then you know what a debt to income ratio is, because it's something
kind of like a waist to height ratio.
Kind of is. And the lenders look at it and they want to see 36% or less. And essentially that means when you look at all of your monthly obligations in debt and you compare them to what you're earning each month, you come out at 36% or less. And
so it's hard to get 36% or less on a waist to height ratio, right?
You'd have to be very tall.
Very tall.
Right?
Very tall.
Very tall. So you look at those two things. The third thing that we want to look at is a measurement of how you're doing as far as your retirement savings is concerned. And Fidelity actually figured out some benchmarks that help people ballpark if they're in the right place.
Right. So we've developed a rule of thumb because this is something that people ask all the time. In fact, we had a question on this from Joy from Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. And she said, how do I know the right amount I need to save for retirement? And so the way we broke it down is to say, by the time you're 30, you should have 1 times your salary. All right. And then by the time you're 50, you should have 6 times your salary. And the normal retirement age we see among the folks who participate in our retirement plans is 67. And at that point, you should have 10 times your salary. And I know some people find that a little overwhelming and say, well, you know, what if I'm not on track? What would you say to them if they said, you know, I'm not quite where I should be?
I would say it's really good that you're looking at the numbers. And knowing where you should be should serve as inspiration to try to do a little bit more and just nudge your rate of savings up. So if you're not automatically increasing the amount that you contribute percentage-wise to your retirement plans every year and maxing out, then you should be doing that a little bit a year until you get there. You may also want to look at making bigger changes, like downshifting a little earlier in the way you live to enable you to really stash a lot of money in your plans.
So a couple things. To your point, the automation is fantastic. If you can hit 15%, that's the recommended amount between your contribution and your employer's contribution. And what you talked about, that auto increase program, that is really powerful because you don't have to say, oh, I'm getting a raise, I'm going to increase. It will automatically increase you 1% or depending on your plan every year. So that's a great feature.
Right.
Now you said there's one more. Okay.
So you need to know your target income replacement rate. And this is not a number that a lot of people know or are familiar with. But essentially, you're trying to figure out how much of your current income you need to replace in order to continue to live as you're living or continue to live comfortably. And you want to replace it with a combination of Social Security and the earnings on your portfolio or your savings. So these numbers, again, were developed by Fidelity, and they were developed for people who earn between $50,000 and $300,000 a year. But what you see as you look at the scale of these numbers is the more that you earn, the less that you actually have to replace percentage-wise, because you are not spending as much, you're saving more. At least you should be saving more. And so we've got a couple of examples. If you take a person who's earning $50,000 a year, for example, they need an 80% replacement rate. They're going to get about 35% of that from Social Security, but the other 45% will come from their savings. And then when you look at somebody who's making double that, or $100,000 a year, again, they're going to get 45% from their savings if they hit that 10X number. But they're only going to get 27% from Social Security because Social Security doesn't replace as much of their monthly take-home simply because Social Security caps out. So their replacement rate gets to 72% if you add those two numbers together, but that's fine because, as you said, some of their expenses are discretionary and because they're saving more, so they need to replace less.
Right. Got it. So we now know how to gauge our physical health as well as our financial health. And so what we want to do now is really put this into action. You know, what are steps that we can take starting today to get on the right track health-wise and financially wise? So Mike, what would you say to our audience on, you know, how do I start putting this into action?
Well, remember, us humans are programmed to do the wrong thing. We're programmed to survive the day, just to live for the day. And we build habits around those that are often bad. But a habit you need is really a brain connection that is ensconced over time. It's like a pathway that gets bigger and bigger and stronger. So you remember when you learned chopsticks on the piano, did you learn the piano?
A little bit.
Okay, so you probably, the first thing you learned was chopsticks. And the first time you played it was really tough. It was really difficult. The 50th time, one, the neighbors were tired of it, but two, it became real easy. And that's because your brain connections, they knew that after this finger went in an automatic fashion. Right. So you developed that habit, which is really a pathway in your brain. Well, when your brain wants to discontinue that pathway, it has to build another one because your brain wants to be busy.
Right.
So you've got to do substitutions. Mm-hmm. So the first thing to do is to think about substitutions for your health you can do.
Okay.
Instead of using the elevator, go up 2 or 3 flights of stairs or down 3 or 4 flights of stairs. So you're getting, if you will, exercise instead of the elevator ride. You should, instead of having, if you will, a sugary drink, have a piece of dark chocolate. A really great, because it gives you some of the same satisfaction, the same indulgence, but it's much better for you. Instead of 15 minutes of, or 30 minutes of sitting on the couch, you do 30 minutes of exercise or walking. So you're getting it. If you do a meeting, a walking meeting, instead of just sitting on the couch. Another one is instead of 15 minutes of surfing the internet, honor sleep. Get 15 minutes more sleep. It's one of the things we don't honor as much as we get older.
I mean, I actually feel like this is one of the areas, and I don't feel like there's so many, but where finance has a little bit of a leg up on health. Like, we truly can automate a lot of things. But when Mike is talking about making these things automatic, he's talking about the fact that they become automatic because you've done them over and over and over again. And so you have to make them.
I do breakfast and lunch automatically. So I've picked out 2 breakfasts that I love. So I love oatmeal with some walnuts and some cherries or some other fruit on it, whatever's in season. And I love a egg white vegetable omelet without cheese. Yep. So when I have time, I do that on the weekends. Otherwise, I'll have the oatmeal, if you will. And those are automatic. I know I'm going to took one of 2 things. For lunch, I have 3 things I love, and I'm going to have one of those 3. It's only dinner I have to think about. But I've automated healthy food into my life, and I don't make mistakes.
And so I do the same thing. I have the same breakfast every morning, and I actually do it. I bring it on the road with me. Like, I pack the cereal, and I bring peanut butter, and then I just order the berries.
You probably love it.
I love it. I love it.
That's right. So you want to establish a relationship with food. Food should be a relationship where you love it and it loves you back. And so if it doesn't love you back, one-way relationships don't work.
Right, exactly.
So that's how I think of automating food. Automate it to, in fact, be a great relationship.
I like that idea of it not loving you, because all of a sudden, as I got a little older, like, there's foods that don't love me back.
But there are also a lot of things that you can do with financial automation as well, and not just with your retirement plans. That's mostly where we talk about it, but it applies in a lot of other areas.
Right, so I'm a huge fan of automation, of course, for my retirement plan we talked about for the HSA, but also I have 3 boys. So we do the college automatically into their 529s. So I don't even see the money.
Yes.
Comes right out and just goes into the plans. And I had a very exciting thing happen. So I said my oldest, started college. And so we wrote our first tuition check. And so we'd saved all those years. So then to be able to take it out of the 529 and pay the tuition was kind of, exciting.
Well, I just wrote my last for my son and had $500 left over.
That's amazing.
Even better.
Amazing. I have a lot of tuition checks between the 3 boys, so in my future.
And it can work the same way with fitness too, right? I mean, these automation things. When I am driving to work, I will park half a mile away so that I can get another, 2,000 steps before I make it into the office.
She goes to 10,000 a day now, which is really the level for breaking insulin. We didn't pick 10,000 out of the air.
Right.
10,000 actually, for some reason, is the level that breaks insulin resistance down. 8,000 isn't 80% of 10,000.
Right. Oh, that's
10,000 is a magic number. 12,000 doesn't get you much more health benefit than 10,000.
Okay, yeah.
Gets you a little fitter, it gets you a little more calorie burn, but it doesn't get you healthier from a metabolic standpoint. So there really is a value to her doing and my doing and your doing and all of us, I heard, do 10,000 steps a day.
Yep, and what I actually try to do is there are days I can't always hit 10,000 steps if I'm traveling a lot, so I try to do 70,000 for the week, and I try to be very accountable. So my husband does the same thing. We actually talk about it. Where are you on your steps? Oh my gosh, I got to make up steps. Let's go out for a walk. I actually track my weekly in my phone, and then this past weekend, I've got a little bit of an inner nerd in me. I actually graph them out and put them up on my mirror. So,
well, I think what you just said about talking about it with your husband is really important. I mean, one of the things that we talk a lot about in the book is having a team around you, a strong team, and having an accountability buddy to keep you honest and to keep the information moving in the right direction. And that's a reason that, on your big birthdays, you may want to sit down and you may want to have a check-in with your representative at Fidelity and have a check-in with your spouse to make sure that you're all heading...
And it doesn't have to be your spouse that's your accountability buddy.
Right.
But in fact, habits are viral. Habits are, that group does the habits together.
Right.
And so you want to have a team around you that you're, if you will, honest with, and it can help you get on the good path. So you want to have a physician you can talk to about the things you need to do and who's honest with you.
And I think this is really important. I love this concept of a team. So kind of think through who is on your financial team and your wellness team, if you will, and make sure you're comfortable and you trust those folks. And if you don't, it might be time to replace someone and get someone you are more comfortable with.
And you said you actually had a wellness coach now through Fidelity.
Yep.
But in fact, that's one of the things you should have. A coach or a buddy is someone who both may be a little more knowledgeable than you, but even if they're not, they keep you accountable, and you and they do things healthily together. And I guess it's healthily both in finance and in wellness.
Exactly.
Well, because, Mike has said for a long time that it's not just germs that are catching, it's behaviors that are catching. And if you surround yourself with the right people, either people who want to be healthy or who want to eat well or who want to be fiscally responsible, then they're going to rub off on you, kind of like people yawn one after another, right?
That's a mirror neuron. So your neurons want to do what the other person is doing. So if you yawn, my brain says, yawn. And it's the same with healthy habits. Now, you said something about financial, if you will, yawning or mirroring with someone who won the lottery.
I was telling you. Yeah, so there was this incredible study done on lottery winners, except they didn't study the lottery winners, they studied their neighbors. And what they saw was that the neighbors were spending huge sums of money, and they were buying houses and boats and cars and, indulging in all sorts of keeping up with the Joneses type behavior.
They had won the lottery too.
Yes, they were mirroring. And so, you need to, if if you want to be financially responsible, you got to be careful to surround yourself with like-minded people.
Exactly. So both kind of health-wise, so, kind of workout buddies, people you're going to talk to your 10,000 steps. I've started meditating, and there's I don't know why it's catching on, but a lot of people are starting to meditate, talking about that. My wellness coach, I think part of why I love my wellness coach is I see her every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. It's an hour to talk about, am I drinking enough water? Am I exercising? How is my stress level? And so it's that accountability and kind of being aware. And, now I've learned new things today, like the deep breathing technique. What I want to talk about now, so we've talked to both Jean and Mike about kind of some of these habits. And what I want to do is make commitments to each other and to our audience. One thing that you're going to do health-wise and wealth-wise to kind of improve your situation. So I'm going to start with you, Mike.
Well, I'm going to go back to my Fidelity representative. Okay. Actually, they're available at the clinic. Good. They don't cost me anything.
Great.
And go over how to transfer other monies into that account and to do that.
Excellent. Glad
now,
to hear it.
On the health one, I do almost everything.
Yes.
I live that life. But I'm going to start actually meditating more.
Yep.
I do the deep breathing, but I'm going to start meditating more routinely so I can help myself.
Good. Okay, excellent. Jean?
I try to do most of the financial things as well, but my son has just gotten his first job, and he's so happy. He's working in sports, which was his dream, but he is really concerned with staying on a budget, and he should be because he's not earning so much money.
Right.
So I'm going to work with him a little bit more
fantastic.
to make sure that he can live within the lines.
Yep.
And as far as physically, I'm going to stretch more. I'm a terrible stretcher, and I'm not going to stand up and demonstrate how I can't touch my toes, but maybe by this time next year I'll be able to.
Okay, so you're going to have to come to my husband's yoga class.
It's
I would really
love
great,
to come to your
very
husband's
relaxing
yoga class.
Okay, so my commitment, so I'm definitely going to stick with my 70,000 steps. I'm going to try to stick with my meditation. So those are both pretty new, like within the last kind of 6 weeks. The other thing I'm going to do, which your book inspired me, is I'm going to get a notebook and I'm going to start tracking all, my blood pressure, my sit-ups, my push-ups. So
I got one more thing I want to do, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
I have a new granddaughter, so I'm going to start a 429 account for it.
529.
It's okay, it'll be bigger.
Good. Excellent. And so then on the financial side, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to just double check. Jean's reminded me to make sure my HSA is invested, that it's not sitting in cash. And then I do have some other money that is sitting in cash. So I've got to figure out what that's for and get that invested. Okay. So any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
I think the final thought I have is you have much more power both over finances and over your rate of aging than you ever thought possible. And this is a place where you can start and learn to do and learn to take control.
And from me, and I think it's in part because I'm inspired having spent the past year working with you, but if you don't know the answer, ask for help. And that goes whether you're talking about your health or whether you're talking about your wealth. These are complicated areas with more and more information coming at you every single day. But there's help available if you ask for it.
Terrific. This has been great. And thank you to all of our viewers for spending this time with us to think about your own health and money. I hope you gained a lot of information to assess where you are and some easy steps that you can take for both your financial and your physical wellness. To find out where you stand financially, use our money checkup tool. And our Fidelity representatives have a lot of training on retirement planning, budgeting, saving for other goals like college, building an emergency fund, and so much more. And there's absolutely no charge to meet with them. So call us today to speak with a Fidelity representative. The number's on your screen. It's 888-766-6813. And then lastly, I'd just like to really thank Jean and Mike for joining us. And
Thank you, A.T.
Well, you're quite welcome. And I look forward to reading your book in its full form when it comes out in the spring. Thank you again.